Hi guys, Chris Philp, the Tory MP, knows that if he goes on GB News, Talk TV or on LBC, as long as James O'Brien is not on, he will not be held to account. And here's another perfect example of that. He was on Nick Ferrari's show talking about leaving the European Convention on Human Rights in order to deport foreign criminals. And of course, there was no real pushback. Have a listen to this.
It's going to cost a huge amount of money to monitor 170 terror suspects. Some of them will require round-the-clock monitoring. And that is why we Conservatives have reached the conclusion we have to come out of the ECHR. It is totally unacceptable that dangerous terrorists and criminals are allowed to stay in the UK because of their human rights. They're criminals. They should get kicked out and returned to their country of origin. And by the way, it's a lot more than 170. There are now something like 20,000 foreign nationals, people who are citizens of another country, who have served sentenced to at least a year in prison and are still in this country. They should all be deported.
I can hear my listeners saying, and I could see you being challenged in the House, congratulations, you've taken us to the same level as Russia or Belarus. How would you respond, Shadow Home Secretary?
Well, that is obviously nonsense. There are many respectable countries not in the ECHR, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and so on and so forth. And the idea that the only thing that protects human rights in the UK is the ECHR is obviously nonsense.
Once again, there's no real pushback here. Yes, my callers may have an issue with Belarus and Russia. That's as far as Nick Ferrari would go. Now, you notice at the very beginning, Chris Philp talked about their human rights when he's talking about the foreign criminals. No, there aren't human rights for foreign criminals. There's human rights for everyone. And if you take away the human rights for foreign criminals, oops, we've also removed your human rights as well. Now, I keep saying this is not so much about human rights, it's about protections to human rights. So when the Tories talk about we're going to take away the protections for human rights for foreign criminals, what they're actually talking about is taking away the protections for human rights for British people. Because that's the end goal here. It has always been the end goal. Now, he mentioned Belarus and Russia. Okay, but if the UK left the ECHR, it would be like Belarus and Russia. Those two countries are not in the ECHR. Like, you can't say, well, that's a ridiculous statement to make that we would be like those. You would be literally like those countries. And of course, he responds by saying, well, what about Canada? What about New Zealand? What about Australia? But they're not in Europe. The ECHR, the E in the ECHR refers to Europe. And it was a consequence of World War II, the damage done to Europe as a result of World War II. So we're not talking about Australia, Canada and New Zealand because they're not in frigging Europe. Is Chris Philp stupid or just pretending? Sometimes it's hard to tell. Now, when it comes to foreign criminals, do you think it'd be easier to deport people if the UK is not upholding human rights, not protecting human rights? Now, he would say, well, of course we're going to protect them. But why do you want to take away this protection for British people as well? You know, if you're saying, well, we're just going to carve out something for foreign criminals, okay, you can try and do that. You can try and work with other countries in the ECHR to achieve that, but you're not doing that. You're saying, no, we need to leave the convention completely. And do you think it will be easier to share information, to access shared information with members of the ECHR if you're outside? Do you think there's a lot of cooperation on sharing of information between members of the ECHR today and Belarus and with Russia? And this is nothing related to the war in Ukraine, just in general. Do you think there's a great deal of information sharing? I don't think so. So it would be worse from a legal point of view. It'd be worse from a situation where you want to deal with foreign criminals if the UK left the ECHR, because it would become an island. It would not be able to access the information like it could before on foreign criminals before they enter the country. What have they been doing before they came to Britain? It'd be much more difficult to access that information, because why would there be an obligation on countries who are in the ECHR, who want to maintain protection for human rights? Why would they want to share this information with a country like Belarus, Russia or the UK if it was outside? And then, of course, we never hear anything in reference to the Good Friday Agreement, because let's be frank, people like Nick Ferrari, people on GB News or Talk TV don't give a flying frig about Northern Ireland or about the peace process on the island of Ireland. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.